Hello and welcome to another episode of Pop Life, brought to you by the wonderful people. This is Revolution Podcast. If you're new to the channel, welcome. So glad to have you with us. If you're a returning listener, subscriber, or one of our very valued patrons, hell yeah! After the main show today, we will be going into the champagne room and have a bit of a listening party with Doc. If you'd like to join us for that and support programming like this, then become a patron or a paid YouTube subscriber. You get access to the champagne rooms and get to join us for movie night watch parties like the one we had this past Thursday, which was a lot of fun. So, you want to do that? Become a patron wherever you're watching or listening to the show. There's links in the description. If you are listening to this later on Apple and you're like, I want to hear, then you can sign up to be a paid Apple listener and get access to all the champagne rooms. Now, let's talk about Megadeth calling it quits. I can recall my 6th grade year in middle school when I truly branched off into my own musical world, a dark world enmeshed in the speed and brutality of heavy metal. The music became the soundtrack to my early obsession with horror cinema. Metal carried some of the same iconography of everything I imagined to be scary and dangerous. After borrowing a friend's copy of Metallica's Jump in the Fire EP, I would endlessly pore over the limited liner notes, wondering who the mysterious D. Mustaine was. Was he the one responsible for the head-banging yet booty-shaking hypnotic groove of the title track? A good friend soon informed me that Mustaine had been unceremoniously dismissed from Metallica and had gone on to form his own band, one that might be even heavier, Megadeth. My first foray into Megadeth was the band's first major label release, Peace Sells, But Who's Buying? From the opening track, Wake Up Dead, I was hooked. I played that cassette so often that the track listing is ingrained in my DNA. I starved myself at lunch to save money and eventually made a trip to a mega record store, The Warehouse in Pinole, California. I was allowed only one purchase with my sacrificial funds, and I chose Megadeth's debut release, Killing Is My Business and Business Is Good. While Mustaine and Combat Records later admitted they lost the original artwork, the crude cover, a plastic skull with tinfoil, scared the bejesus out of me. It looked like something from a madman's Etsy store. I was all in. When the dark piano and finger-tapped guitar opening of Last Rites Love to Death kicked in, I felt like I was strapped to a chair in a serial killer's basement. For preteen me, this album was genuinely terrifying. It was calculating, fast, heavy, and Mustaine's voice was unlike anything I had ever heard before or since. Megadeth, along with Metallica, Slayer, and Anthrax, would come to be known as the Big Four of thrash metal. Their rise from underground club bands in the 1980s to arena headliners in the 1990s was amazing to watch. Seeing them go from late-night Headbangers Ball to the Arsenio Hall show was a sight to behold. As Megadeth matured through the 90s, their success transformed them into radio rock, a fate that would have seemed unthinkable just a decade earlier. Their sound softened, and I eventually fell out of touch with them musically. I suppose, as we all grew up, we went our separate musical ways, but the imprint the band left on me can be found in everything I do musically to this very day. But today, we look back at the legacy of heaviness and recount the enduring story of Megadeth. And I am joined by a man who also was inspired to write heavy riffs because of Megadeth. Please welcome founding guitar player of God Forbid, Doc Coyle.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
How are you, Doc?
I'm having a flustered day, running late, not properly caffeinated, still a coffee short, but
Yeah, that's the worst.
we're going to try and, bring our A game nonetheless.
What was your first introduction into Megadeth?
So Megadeth is part of my heavy metal origin story.
Okay.
So I grew up in relatively, inner city environment, mostly black and brown. And but in the neighborhood I kind of came up in, there were these two white girls who were sisters, and I was friends with them. And I remember I was at the time I was spending some time at my dad's house. I was getting a little older, and I would come to and went to visit my mom. So I was back in that little neighborhood, and I hadn't seen them in a while, and they had become kind of rock and roll, heavy metal teeny boppers. So I'm going in their room, and they have like posters of like Sebastian Bach and Axl Rose, and they're watching MTV, and it was like I saw the video for Symphony of Destruction. It was like a light bulb moment in my life where it's like, what is that? And it was just I was completely drawn to it, and went home, told my brother, I was like, we need to MTV. It has the thing. We need the thing, the stuff, the riffs, the thing, And so even before Metallica, before Guns N' Roses, it was Megadeth. And of course, like, I think some of those bands kind of maybe went past Megadeth in terms of like being my favorite, but Megadeth is still right there, top probably 5 for me all time, top 10 at the bare minimum. And yeah, really formative to just my style of guitar playing and riff writing. I still tend to think in melodic terms, in very intricate terms. Just their melodic sensibility is unique to all the big 4 bands, and maybe all thrash metal in general. They just have a little bit more of this refined quality, like okay, so here's what sets Megadeth apart from all these bands. All right, Dave Mustaine would come out, all right, in a white collared shirt, okay.
Yeah.
And and when you saw Megadeth, it's like, like this was like the thrash metal band that could be senators. They were the most professional. That was like at least I guess I'd say when you get into the Countdown to Extinction years, maybe not the early years when they're like
Still in
doing
t-shirt.
speed and heroin and that version of it. But yeah, there's something to this day that just they're really one of a kind. There's not I'd say maybe there's like, I don't know if you know that band Havoc.
Yeah.
Really great, like thrash band. Like I hear like a lot of Megadeth and Havoc, but outside of Havoc, like you just don't hear too many new bands like, oh, that's clearly a Megadeth thing. Like I hear a lot. Avenged Sevenfold has a lot of parts that are like, oh, that's a Megadeth thing. Or I think Lamb of God, in their style, there's a lot of Megadeth, especially like early P Cells kind of type stuff. But obviously, because of the vocals and how heavy Lamb of God is, a lot of people don't make that connection, to the Megadeth influence. So yeah, their uniqueness is, pretty singular. And like you said, with his voice and his like, I think we don't talk about Megadeth a lot, maybe more so than any band of the entire thrash era. Is he's probably the best lyricist of the entire genre. Like the things he was talking about, the subject matter, being able to kind of create phraseology that like sticks with you, like these kind of like, hello me, meet the real me.
Yeah.
Peace sells with who's buying. Like that's
Yeah.
like bumper sticker, like almost like there's a political marketing. I hate to use the word propaganda, but
look, that's the true meaning of the word, so we can't look at it as a pejorative when we use it in its true meaning.
Yeah,
So,
sure. But I'm saying in terms of understanding like a certain phrase, how that sticks with you, and how like the nature of how memorable his lyrics were, and the things he was talking about, that it was like there was a seriousness and kind of social consciousness that I think goes back, that that was a lot more sophisticated than I think than a lot of the other bands at the time.
Yeah, I think there was a sophistication to what they were doing. Let me ask you this, and I never thought about this till I watched an interview with David Ellison, who actually came on the show and talked more about Megadeth than I thought he was going to, because I won't get into it, but I wasn't supposed to ask him too many Megadeth questions. But I had a bunch of Megadeth questions. I was listening to what we're going to listen to later in the Champagne Room, I made a list of my 25 favorite Megadeth songs that do span the range of their career. While I'm not the biggest fan of the later stuff, uh, when I listened to the early stuff that got me hooked, and I want to know how this affects you with songwriting as well. Some songs translate it, like you said, like "Peace Sells, but Who's Buying?" just ends up translating to an arena. Doon, 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 right? You can see the fist pumping in the air. When you're writing songs, because you and I are, I'm slightly older, but we still come from an era of we're making songs for small places, right? This is going to get people in the pit. This is going to get people stoked for the pit. Um, David Ellefson said, "We liked songs like Rattlehead, but when we tried to play them in the arena, it didn't translate. It
Yeah.
wasn't made for that. Those songs were made for clubs." And you really hear all four of those bands. I guess Slayer kind of didn't really change too much, but
They did. If you look at South of Heaven and Season of the Abyss, they slowed down. They
that's fair. That's fair. Um, but they're making songs now for the arena. They're making songs that are going to be a little bit more friendly for radio because just everything's changed. Their fan base has changed. Where they're playing is literally a different spot. So the way people react to music is going to be different. Did you ever find yourself changing the way even you wrote music as the venues you play changed?
absolutely. I mean, definitively, God forbid, currently right now we're playing this Constitution of Treason set, so it's the 20-year anniversary of Constitution of Treason, and that record came out in 2005, or we wrote it in 2005, but the previous year was kind of our breakout year. We put a record out called Gone Forever, and we got to tour with we did 4 months of touring with Machine Head,
Mm,
and we toured all I'd say we did about 3 months with Slipknot that
okay.
year. And so I think those two bands, and like this is the first time we're ever playing arenas, really. First time we're ever playing, amphitheaters and some, playing Ozfest and playing these bigger festivals. And then you see, like, when you watch those bands, you go, okay, this kind of thing seems to really move the audience, and this thing seems to really translate. Um, and that was very, very present in the writing of the next record. And and in a way that I don't know has been present since. I think with Bad Wolves, there was definitely a situation where like the first record, I didn't write a lot of those songs.
Mhm.
Um, but I did help out. Like there'd be like a part where I'm like, why are you guys going like right into this heavy part? Like it should be like there's no dynamics. You're not setting it up. So when we were doing the second record, Nation, um, there's like a song called No Messiah, and there's a song called what is it? I'm forgetting the damn names of the record. But anyway, there's a few songs I worked on where it was like, let's build the parts when the heavy thing kicks in. It's like you really get the full kind of reaction from the crowd. So I feel like I always tend to think about how it's going to come across live.
Mhm.
Uh, Whereas maybe some people are not thinking about that are so in the like we're writing songs in front of a computer, and you're not really worried about the transition because you're just cutting and pasting and things like that. So yeah, that those kind of I'd say those two different angles of doing the first round of touring with Bad Wolves and seeing like what wasn't really connecting. Go, how do we kind of make these songs a little bigger? How do we make these songs? And we were touring with bands like Five Finger Death Punch and 3 Days Grace, and you're getting to see like again, it's for me, it's touring is like an education. When you get to
Mm.
when and I don't care what band it is, if you're not, I've never been an elitist, but you really got, we got to do 3 shows with Nickelback in
Mhm.
Australia, and
How
I
was
watch
that?
every incredible. I watched every note, and just seeing how they work and what they do. Because I mean, you don't get to that level by accident.
Mm.
And I think there's a lot of, there's people within the band who just wouldn't watch the bands. And I'm like, why would you not do that? Like, do you think you know something they don't? Like the fact that you're like turning down a free education, like a firsthand, Papa Roach. We did a lot of touring with Papa Roach,
Mhm.
and that band taught me so much about professionalism.
Really?
Absolutely, man. So they're meticulous with every day they're improving their show. Every day they're working on, uh, they're working on interludes. They're tweaking their tones. They're putting covers in. It's just never, and they just keep getting better. They're 25, whatever, 30 years into their career, and they're the best they've ever been. And that's
That's
from
interesting. Yeah.
working. And by the way, that's not talent. That's going, we're going to outwork talent. And obviously they're extremely talented,
It's
but
woodshedding though.
yeah, but
Yeah.
I think it's going, hey, we're a really great band, but why is that band in this venue or in this venue? We're better than them. All right, let's grind it out. Let's keep working. Let's keep tweaking. Let's see what, and that kind of uh thing has been something I've always really tried to pay attention to uh when it comes to just learning like I said, you're that proximity
Mhm.
and you see it every day. And if you're
Mhm.
not absorbing like what you can learn, I'll give an example. Almost speaks exactly to your question.
Mhm.
I went to see it was the Summer Sanitarium tour, Metallica, Linkin Park, Limp Bizkit, Deftones, Mudvayne. And first time I seen Metallica, and I saw Limp Bizkit. Limp Bizkit was getting like booed. Like people were like, this was like the peak backlash against the Metallica fans and Limp Bizkit. And they played break stuff, and they had this extended break, like where it's like, give me something to break was like that was when it hit, but they dragged it out for like 2 minutes of just like creating tension and hyping people up. And I literally stole that for God forbid, because we were about to do Ozfest. And I was like, this is a cool song, but I'm like, I think we should, that breakdown, it's so heavy. We should build it up. And so that when it hits, everyone goes crazy. And it literally became the craziest part of our set for like 5 years. And I stole that from Limp Bizkit. But if I was some elitist who was like, they're they're sellout new metal, and I'm not gonna watch Limp Bizkit, right? And what I noticed, that was a crowd that was hating them, and when that shit hit, they all went off.
That's interesting that you say that. I definitely stole something from a band called Seven Dust.
One of my favorites.
I got to see them live for $5 in Palo Alto, California, because they had a canceled tour date with they were on tour with Stained, and something happened with Aaron Lewis, so they didn't want to end the, like, they couldn't fill the room, so they played a small club. The Edge in Palo Alto was also known as the Keystone, so people have probably seen images of it if you ever read the book Murder in the Front Row. It's a photo book of the Bay Area metal
Oh,
scene. Yeah. But anyway, my daughter listened to the music in the car with me when I would take her to school. This was when they were doing the maybe seasons. So like what
mhm,
is it, 03 or so?
something like
And,
that.
and so she didn't know what they looked like. And my friend, we had to buy tickets. We had to stand in line to buy tickets because there was no, it was like a random, they announced it on the radio. We motored down to Palo Alto, which is in Silicon Valley. And we were in this kind of like bar and grill area they had of the venue, but the band happened to be in there as well. And my kid was the only child there, and she's a beige child. She's part Asian, and I guess Lejean has a kid that's like part Latin or something. So they see this beige kid, and they were like, "Oh, that looks like Lejean's daughter." And they went up to me and like, "Oh, would you mind if our singer came over and said hi to your kid?" And she had no idea who these people were, and because she liked the songs, but she didn't see them. So they're taking pictures with her. They're really, really, really nice guys, like frighteningly nice guys. And then uh, I went with some buddies that were in bigger bands. So we got like the VIP area to watch the show. And she spent the whole show jumping up and down, singing every word. But there's this one moment where they do the song. I can't remember the song. It's like the second to last song on the album Home. And they have this sick ass breakdown.
Oh, it's a
Get
get up,
Yeah,
get
get
up.
up. I was like, that is the sickest fucking shit. And with my band Bitter, like we incorporate something like that at the end of our set. But it kind of takes you to church in a way almost, uh, which really speaks to their southern roots. But I was like, this is the sickest shit ever. And people, all this new metal, like you said, the purists are like, this is new metal bullshit. But I'm like, this is one of the tightest bands I've ever seen. I went to
Yeah.
go see them with all of my metal friends. You can't shit on a good show. And you kind of
Well,
got to give it to these people that have to play in arenas. You have to put on a good show.
Seven Dust is one of those bands though that has respect across like metal dudes, hardcore kids, everyone. Like they're Seven Dust is one of the most influential bands for modern metalcore. Like bands like Bring Me the Horizon and Bury
Mm.
Your Dead, and so many of these bands. Like even if they don't realize they're influenced by Seven Dust, a band that probably influenced them was influenced by Seven Dust. They're sneakily very influential.
They to me, they never got over.
Yeah, I mean, they never hit that Disturbed, kind of level. But they're, you know, they're those like first, I'd say four records are just incredible, and they all went gold. So they no slouches,
Oh,
and
look, they're probably not working regular jobs when they come home.
no, no, and I think they're having a real renaissance right now as well.
I always say good for them. But I felt like they never hit those big rooms that some of their contemporaries hit. And I've always wanted to know like why. I felt like they had the sound.
I mean, I think what was it? Basically, they put out that record Animosity,
Yeah.
which I think is their best record, and they're
Yes.
on TVT Records, and I don't think that record label really
Push.
could really get them where they needed to be to like because that record had big hits, and I think they pushed the wrong singles. And then Seasons came out, which was great. Um, and there's like the really big, and I feel like that record label helped held them back a little bit. And then um uh was it Clint Lowry quit,
Yeah.
and so that kind of created a little bit of difficulty, I think, there for a little bit. And then kind of the whole new metal thing became a little out of favor for a little bit, and so you had that situation. But they're holding it down. Great band, great people.
But back to Megadeth. Like I said in the introduction, my first Megadeth album that I purchased with my own money was Killing Is My Business and Business Is Good. But it was one of the early editions where it had these boots and mechanics and stuff on it. And I thought Megadeth was like the scariest band ever because the quality was so bad compared to their contemporaries. And that did something for me where it was like, because this quality is so like bad, almost punkish, and
Yeah.
because this album cover looks like all the low budget trauma horror movies that I watched at 11 and 12 years old, I was like, this band is the scare. I thought Dave Mustaine and these people were all murderers. Like I believed in my soul, everyone, Gar Samuelson, the late, rest in peace, looked like a zombie. I didn't know when I was 11 that they were just whacked out of their mind on dope. But that album scared the shit out of me. And then when you get to Peace Sells, that is like heavy metal perfection. Like there's a few records for me, and I don't know if you're the same way, where it's heavy metal perfection. And it's definitely Peace Sells and at the same year as Master of Puppets. Like, can you get any better than it's
I mean, I think
Up
Rest in
Heaven?
Peace is better than Peace Sells, but
Really?
yeah, I think that's pretty much the consensus. But I think if you grew up around that time and that was your record, it's kind of hard to see it any other way. But I think consensus. I mean, I would say He Sells is basically. I mean, it might be damn near better than Master Puppets, but they're right. It's right there. I
There's
think I would say
Go
I would
ahead.
say Holy Wars is probably the best thrash metal song ever, if not the best metal song ever.
Yeah, I mean, we can fight over it if you like, and I will.
No, I've already had
I'll
these.
take Doc. I'll take Doc's side. Is what I'm saying. I'll take your side. I think Holy Wars is from start to finish. It has everything you want.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, but obviously it's subjective. But and I would, when God forbid we shared a tour bus with Lamb of God, it'd be like me and my brother arguing with the Adler brothers till 3 in the morning over what's better, Rest in Peace or Peace Sells. But so I don't. Again, there's no right answer. We all have
Can I
our.
ask you? Can I ask you this question? Since you've had these arguments, look, if you've ever listened to this kind of music, I feel like these are the arguments you have, and I'm sad that you guys toured before the podcast era because you probably would have had the biggest music show around with that fight. Because it's a fun fight, right? No one's gonna go to blows over it.
I mean,
There
you
is
never
a
know.
song. My favorite song is "Good Morning Black Friday." It's my favorite Megadeth song, and that clean introduction is like nothing I had ever heard, and I haven't really heard anyone do something like that because it doesn't really make sense. That arpeggiated clean with that lead. I think it's Poland playing the lead over
Yeah,
Mustaine's real sideways clean riffing, which we hadn't really heard, right? It's just kind of arpeggiated chords with Metallica, and that's the
that's
first time I'm
beautiful.
hearing it. Poland's leads are so tasteful, my
Yeah,
God. And when you hear the lead over that, it's just like, oh, what am I getting into? Like you can feel yourself spiraling into madness. Rust in Peace doesn't really have that for me because it just punches you in the face from Holy Wars to the title track at the end, or Polaris at the end. Like it is non-stop. It's a perfect record. It's a perfect record. I listened to it way too many times as a young person as well. I remember that video being on regular rotation on MTV, and I was like, Megadeth made it. They're regular rotation. Like I don't need to hear Hangar 18 ever again because I heard it too many times myself playing it. But when I go back and listen to Peace Sells, it's always Good Morning Black Friday. I was working out this morning and that song came on. I was like, phew. And I don't know if you're the same way. Like I like to work out to crazy, angry white boys yelling. Uh, but there's something about that song where there's not really yelling. It's I think it's one of the heaviest songs they've ever done. I don't know if you feel the same way.
no, it's great. I just, to me, I guess I always say, like, when it comes to Megadeth and Metallica, I'm more objective than the person who grew up where they bought. If you bought Ride Lightning the first day,
Mhm.
you have an emotional autobiographical attachment to that record. And so if I'm the guy who got to listen to all of them at the same time, and I'm not favorable, I'm not going to go, this one's better just because I heard it first. I'm saying when you listen to it from that perspective, from a 90s perspective, and again, was Rest in Peace was not, was that came out in 90?
86. Oh, Rust
80,
in Peace was 90. Yeah, 90.
90,
You're right.
right? But it, like, to me, when I listen to Peace Sells, there is something a little more juvenile about it, if that makes sense. There's something a little more, I guess, like, you hear like that British kind of, like, there's something a little more old school about it. Whereas Rust in Peace feels like we're changing thrash metal. We're changing what it means. We're changing. I think Marty Friedman's entrance into the band
Yeah.
is so fundamental,
Yeah.
and represents this kind of sonic sea change. And so there's just it's just a graduation in terms of, where it's like, oh, this is the next thing, um, that even Megadeth has not achieved that sense, and
Yeah.
that's okay, There's nothing, there's nothing wrong, but there's something just more grown up about it. There's something more evolved about it, um, and and that's not to diminish, like, I mean, Peace Sells has some of the greatest songs the band has ever written, but it feels like the early stages of figuring out this thing, and then all of a sudden we perfected it. Whatever that
It's
thing we were going
yeah.
for.
No, it's look.
That's my opinion. That's my opinion.
Tornado of Souls. Tornado of Souls. Let's be honest. That is a riff that when you hear it, you're like, let's go.
Yeah, and they could. I don't think they could have written something that refined and kind of subtle. And like what I'm saying, when a band has all the tools and yet they know how to not throw the kitchen sink and they know how to lean back into it, like I don't know if they would have had the discipline to write a song that kind of melodically coherent and smooth, right? All the edges are smoothed out by the time and yet take no prisoners. You're like, it does not get more intense, it doesn't get heavier, so they're able to it's like when like I don't know if you're a basketball fan, but like when you watch LeBron in when he went back to the Cavs, all of a sudden he knew how to slow the game down. Right. So he might not have been as physically dominant as he was in Miami, but all of a sudden he knew how to post up. He knew how to take his time. He knew how to save his energy. So it's like he put the mental side with the physical side, and that ultimately was a better player. And that's what I'd say what Rest in Peace was, in my opinion. So.
No, let's go back one record, because I think we have to set everything in its historical context. I think that really matters when we talk about these albums, and having the opportunity to talk to David Ellefson really put certain things into perspective, as I can look back on even trying to record records where it kind of feels like, well, either this is going to work or I'm going to have to do something else. And they do an album called So Far So Good So What, where they're really kind of steeped in their addictions, and there's people in the band that are really addicted at the time, and they're going through players. Jeff Young joins the band, who I think was a good addition. I actually really like Jeff Young's leads. Tonally, I think So Far So Good So What is a record of its time. You can hear the rack mounted gear. Like if the 80s had a certain sound, to me it's the sound of the rack mounted gear, people. So to me it's a thinner sound. I don't know if you agree.
I just think that album is underrated because of the production just being a little kind of vacuous and just almost like it's just harsh, but I in a weird way, and I think they just don't, outside of In My Darkest Hour, it doesn't have like kind of the hits that you think of when you think of Peace Sells, but it has. I mean, that opening, those first two tracks, I think are incredible. Obviously, My Darkest Hour, Hook and Mouth is one of my favorite.
Hook and Mouth, because Hook and Mouth is one of their best songs.
But I see why people have some issues with it. But Mary Jane is on that one too.
Yeah.
I think it's a really good song. So it's I think that album suffers from being sandwiched between Peace Sells and Rest in Peace. So people kind of look at it as a lesser.
It almost, does it feel formulaic to you in a way too? It's like, okay, we kind of got the formula down for how to write a metal record, so let's just write a metal record that sounds like a metal record.
No, to me it probably sounds like a band that's like on a schedule. And it's like, all right, we got to make the record. And again, these were the party years. These were the hard drug years. These are the, and so you kind of, you kind of pick which Megadeth record. Like, okay, this was the speed record. This was the heroin record. This was the coke record. This was the drinking record. So I feel it's that. But it's funny, back in the day, I listened to this one more than I listened to Peace Sells.
I could never get So Far. So look, there's another thing that we forget about when we talk about music, which is you had to be able to afford to buy it, and I definitely couldn't afford to buy it all. So when I would go to a record store, I'd always see that cover, that long box of So Far So Good So What, and I always thought it was a cool cover, and you flip it over and the band looks so badass in the back. And I thought that the song titles were cool. And when I finally got to hear it, there was a little bit of a letdown, To your point, I listened to it years later. I'd heard the singles, right? I'd heard it was Darkest Hour, and I think Mary Jane, but finally listening to the record in its entirety, I don't think to your point, I don't think it's a bad album. I just don't think it's, when you look at those first 4 records, it definitely
Well, it's like I'm looking at it now. Like I think what the Anarchy in the UK cover, not the greatest. Mary Jane's good, 502 is good, and My Dark Side good. Liar, not my favorite, and I love Hooking 'Em Out. So it's a short album. It's only 8 songs. That's the
yeah.
other thing too. So it probably feels like I'm not getting a ton to kind of chew on. Um, and that's probably that's how a lot of records would be like back in the day. Like people would not make these super long records with 20 songs. It would
Well, because
sometimes.
vinyl only holds 48 minutes total on both sides. So it that's not how people thought. Um, again, hear Ellefson talk about it. He's like, dude, by the time we were finished with that album, we were hundreds of thousands of dollars in the hole, tax debt and drug debt. We were trying to come out of a drug fueled haze. There's something that you feel in Rust in Peace after this record where it's like, this is a band that is on some do or die shit. And when they're in the studio, it's almost like, and they have the people now that are all on board, right? Poland's out of the band. Sadly, Young is out of the band, but you have a very hungry Marty Friedman in the band. Nick Menza, who had been with the guys for a few years as a tech, he's finally in the band. So the people that are in there that want to make contributions as well, they're bringing their best foot forward. Everybody is just on it, and you hear it. And even when you hear someone like Ellefson recount how they were coming up with songs, it feels like there was a unit. The studio that I lived in for years had a basketball hoop right outside Testament and Faith No More's room. And it's where everybody went. We kept a couple basketballs out there, and you just shot around and talked shit. Shot around and talked shit. And you see everybody walking by, right? Every band of every genre walking by. You can hear the noise, and then you go in your room, and now you're inspired. And Ellefson says there was a lot of that going on when they were writing that record. I think they were at SRI or something in LA, and there was a basketball hoop out there, and they were talking about how that was the inspiration for a lot of their songs. I don't know if it's the same with you, if you had one of those where you were writing God forbid songs.
We have had no hoop.
Oh man, I would suggest more people get some sort of fun thing. I brought a football, and then we would throw a football around.
We would just watch. I feel like for us, it was like, God forbid, man. It was like it's crazy how much cinema influenced our, just where our heads were at, and the great art like that, and then like a lot of like comedy stuff would kind of influence just our interactions. It's like just like I feel like we're the band that was born by Chappelle Show. Like just how we talk to each other, like just
Mhm.
all of our little lingo. Like we were just mainlining Chappelle Show, I think, and
It
you
was
know,
popular.
um, but as far as like hanging out, yeah, but we would like watch movies together, and we would like we had this van, this like green Astro van, and
Mm,
it was around the time that video like the blockbusters were kind of closing up, but
mhm.
not they weren't closed yet, but they were like VHSs were on the way out and DVDs were in, so they would be selling these VHSs for like $5. And we would go, and we had a little TV with like a VHS player, and so we would just like it was just fun to like smoke weed and watch Training Day for the 50th time, but it was loud, so you'd have to have the subtitles on, so we would memorize all the lines from Training Day and Lean on Me and Don't Be a Menace or Drink Your Juice in the Hood and Lord of the Rings and The
Mhm.
Matrix, and just all these but like I think we bonded through like just being in the van and finding ways to kill boredom, and obviously a lot of drinking and smoking weed and stuff like that.
But that cohesion makes magic, right? Do you agree?
I mean, we always hung out, like even in our spare time, like we would. have parties and barbecues, and we were always just, we would write, and then we'd stay at our John's house, our bass player's house in Pennsylvania. Like half the week we would just be there because it would so much to drive back and forth. So just fuck it, just stay here and kind of. So we've always said, God forbid, it was more like a family than a band.
Well, that maybe speaks to again the quality of the music, because I feel when everybody is together and there's cohesion in there, you really do get some kind of magic. Because when I listen to later Megadeth records, when it's kind of the Dave Mustaine show with different musicians who are all extremely talented, it's not like these are just nobodies. These are really good musicians. It still doesn't. I don't know how much input those guys have in the songwriting process.
I mean, apparently they do. I think apparently he's pretty open minded with that stuff from what I hear. I can't speak to it on a personal level, but I do think there's an element of kind of, I think that this, to for lack of imagination, making another sports analogy, in terms of, like, you hear about these teams that win a championship and
Mhm.
kind of that willingness to put the greater good above your own
Yeah.
personal want. And I think that level of camaraderie, and kind of like, we're here for some bigger mission,
Hmm.
and then when you have a bunch of people very bought into that idea, is when I think uh you really touch greatness. And then you get older, and then people get wives and they get kids, and they're kind of, the greater mission changes, and it's harder to be as completely 100 committed to one thing that is kind of everything. I think when you're really young too, your band is your identity. It's everything who you are. I have to I am dying on this record, because if I don't make something great, then my
Hmm.
career's over and I don't
Yeah.
get to do this, and I got to go back to mowing lawns or whatever. And I think that's definitely bled into, I think, the records that were the most probably um palpably kinetic, and just like, this is it. There's nothing else except this, that level of kind of um tunnel vision.
Which is interesting because in the band, after the success of Rust in Peace, they release Countdown to Extinction, which a lot of people, if you're a fan of the band, says is formulaic because it is very uh, a verse hook, with the exception of Ashes in Your Mouth. Um, but I like that record, but I don't go to it as much, even though many of their big hits are on that record. I think that might have been their highest charting record.
I mean,
Is uh,
it's their biggest selling record by far. It sold 2 million copies in the States, and it's really, it's really important also to extrapolate Countdown in the backdrop of what was happening in the 90s. It
mm,
was a sink or swim moment for thrash bands, and either you were Megadeth, Metallica, and Anthrax and Slayer, who all found a way to survive the shift that the music changed with glam metal disappearing and grunge taking over. And all those bands, like, I said, Slayer
mhm,
to the lesser degree,
mhm.
but still, like, there was, Season the Abyss, that was not a song they would have written 3 records before.
Sure.
Dead Skin Mask was not a song they would have written. Like, in hindsight, you listen to Season of the Abyss, it's still a thrash record, but it is
It's
the
dark.
tempos are a
Yeah.
lot more restrained. But even just that chorus, "Look, keeping your soul, look
Yeah.
outside yourself." That's a hook, man.
The
They were in
double verse. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
but that song it's verse, it's like big intro, but verse, chorus, solo, verse, chorus, right? And then Anthrax bringing John
John
Bush
Bush.
in with Sound of White Noise. So I think there was something that was unspoken clearly with those bands. And even I'd say, to you have Testament with The Ritual was kind of their version of like a hard rock album. You had, even Exodus, I think, with Toxic Waltz, kind of doing something a little more
Yeah.
mid-tempo and straightforward. Forbidden, this great record called Green. No one ever talks
Yeah.
about I really
Shout
love.
out to Craig Cicero. You just made Craig Cicero's day.
He knows I love Green. He knows. But what I'm saying is, you had a lot of actually, it goes even further. That even Overkill with their records, kind of, they made a groove record, a kind of groove metal album. But everyone was trying to figure out how to survive, and a lot of those bands, like Testament, Exodus, kind of broke up momentarily, or took a hiatus, or having a tough time.
Yeah, some bands took a you know, getting to know those guys was actually kind of interesting, hearing them talk about the 90s, especially the way the 90s did them. And I think you're bringing up something that's really interesting when we think about what we're later going to call hair metal. One of the things I write about all the time is the reality of that moment. And I think we look at the 80s and we think it bleeds into the 90s. And technically it does, but hair metal is done by 87. Motley Crue's taken off the makeup by 87. Girls, it's gone. They're wearing t-shirts and riding Harleys. They're no longer dressing like Aerosmith. And if you look at what they were doing, once they got a certain level of success, because everything is metal up until about 84, we really start trying to get these different classifications, because the guys that we're later going to call hair metal don't want to have all dude crowds. And they're really trying to draw these demarcating lines, but they also don't want to be looked at as Kiss wannabes. There's I've been going through interviews, right? Because there's no like documents we can look up, unlike the normal history that I get to study. So you have to watch a shit ton of interviews. And when you watch old Motley Crue interviews from like the early 80s, I'm talking before Theater of Pain, one of the things they say is that they're street rock. You would never think of hearing that from a band like Motley Crue. And there's this interview where the interviewee is going, yeah, you guys are a lot like Kiss. And Nikki Sixx gets pissed. Nikki Sixx and Vince Neil get pissed. They're like, no, we're nothing like Kiss. We did a little tour with Kiss. And people have to remember this. When Motley Crue plays the US Festival, they never left California. The US Festival is like what? 400,000 people, 300,000 people got to see them. They had never played outside of California. They did like a little West Coast run with Kiss, but they said, and I quote, when you see us, it's the real deal because we're street. Kiss, they take the makeup off and they're a corporation. And I was like, this is funny. I wish I had a Marty McFly time machine to tell you guys who you're going to be in a few years. But that's really how they saw themselves. They didn't want to be like Kiss. They're like, we're not like them. We're more like Deep Purple. We love Deep Purple and like these street bands. And what they're really saying is like, we want to keep it real. We think Kiss is posers. And by 83, Kiss took off the makeup, if you remember, and they did Vinnie Vincent ears. And again, I don't know if you're a fan of that stuff. But by 87, we also have the emergence of bands like Guns N' Roses and LA Guns. These guys are from the scene, but they're like the Stones turned to 11.
And well, it's like Stones, it's Aerosmith, it's the real deal. I always say I think Guns N' Roses killed hair metal as much as Nirvana, because I think they were like, oh no, we're a fucking hard rock band and we're the real deal, and it kind of looks like you guys, but no, this is not bullshit. And all those other bands look so frilly in comparison to Guns N' Roses. And again, there's a reason why Guns N' Roses can tour with Metallica in, was it 92?
Where James lit himself. Yeah.
But like where that correlation makes sense. But it doesn't work with any of those other bands. Like there was just something, Guns N' Roses was pissed. And they were like, it was just a different thing. But if you watch that Welcome to the Jungle video, you're like, this could almost be the way the band looks. Like, oh, this could be a Skid Row video. It could be, something
Skid Row really like. Look, I don't know.
They were later too. They were more in that Guns N' Roses vein too, but not quite as
dead. It's dead Go back to 87. If you read Motley Crue's book, Nikki Sixx was producing Guns N' Roses' first record, but he was too smacked out, or was supposed to produce it, but he was too smacked out, and they didn't do it. So luckily for GNR, I forget who produced that record, but
Mike Clint.
Okay.
I read Slash's book, and he doesn't. I don't remember him talking about Nikki Sixx. Basically, they didn't have a manager, and the A&R guy at Geffen was essentially their manager, and they just kept demoing with people to find like the producer that could kind of capture what they did live, but it took a long time. It took like a year for them to find like the producer, but ultimately it was Mike Clint.
Yeah, Six apparently was one of them, and Slash was there when Nikki Sixx died. Him and Adler were in the room when.
Can we stop saying that? All right, death is permanent. Okay, you are not dead. Okay, your heart stopped, and then you came back. All right, dead people are at the fucking morgue, dead.
You don't like Nikki Sixx's superhero story?
I don't like people that speak hyperbolically about shit to like make their lives more tragic than they are. I get it was rough.
Oof.
I get it's a great thing to put on a fucking, to sell a book.
Yeah.
But just say like, yo, man, you flatlined and you came back. All right. I've seen Flatliners. It's a great movie. I enjoy it. Okay. It is not a documentary. Okay. It is fiction and we enjoy it. Okay. It's enjoyable.
It's
calm down.
It's part of the hero's journey for these guys, right? Especially for
no, it's some straight up. You know what it is? It's fucking Easter. That's what it is. Everyone wants to be Jesus.
Damn. Someone says in retrospect, GNR is street rock. I think if you listen to Hanoi Rocks, again, I don't know if you were ever a Hanoi Rocks guy, but the look that those guys were trying to get, we're talking Guns N' Roses and LA Guns and Faster Pussycat. Let's throw all those guys in the same little mix because they all grow up together in Southern California. They were listening to they heard Hanoi Rocks and lost their shit. And Izzy will tell you like his look was like directly like, I want to look like this. We want to sound like this. And those bands to me did that thing. And again, I think they turned it up to 11, especially with a band like Guns N' Roses, because they really did have some heavy metal, thrash metal influences as well, which like
sure.
I said, helps them be able to tour with Metallica. But if you were to go back and listen to some of the derivative stuff that comes out of the late 80s that is going to be called hair, like let's say, for example, the W bands, Warrant, Winger, White Lion, we're also throwing people in a pot because it's popular. And I think people forget about that. And because of the success of Quiet Riot and Motley Crue and people going, oh, all we need is hair. There's a book called Nothing But a Good Time that became a 3-part documentary series, which I think is really interesting. And Stevie, I can't remember his name. He was a singer of a band called Tough. And they were the #1 band on TRL, Total Request Live, the same time Nirvana was like the number 20 band. And he talks about that changeover happening. And the writers of the book talk about, and this is where I think it's really interesting. And
I gotta get this book. It already sounds fun already.
We're going to watch the rest of the documentary on the show. So if you want to join us one of these movie nights where we actually watch the next 2 parts of the documentary.
Where's the documentary available?
Paramount.
Okay.
Whoever, I'm in Mexico, so things are a little different when I stream them. So I don't know what streaming service that would be. It's called Nothing But a Good Time as well. It's really, really good. But one of the things they actually talk about, which I think is important, and I think you can speak to this too. You probably saw something similar happen in your hood. When Motley Crue hit, Stevie, I'm so mad I'm forgetting this poor man's name because we're friends on Instagram. But the singer from Tough is from somewhere in the Midwest. He goes to LA with a friend because that's where everybody goes to get famous. And Poison has just hit. And when Poison hit, and they have a very interesting story about how they even got signed to why they blew up, has a lot more to do with like the internal struggles of the record label and firing all their A&Rs and just dumping all of the promotion budget into Poison's first record, a record that their producer at the time thought was a flop. He was like, this album is horrible. These guys suck. Ends up selling millions of records. But the point is that after Poison hits, people in Los Angeles are now going, we're looking for a singer in the Bret Michaels mold. And Bret Michaels is a derivative of Vince Neil, who's a derivative of of David Lee Roth, who you can say is a bit of a derivative of Robert Plant. So by the time you have this bastardized version of Robert Plant by the late 80s, no one really is buying the copy of the copy. What are you really seeing at this point? And the singer from Tough actually admits that. He goes, I looked like Bret Michaels when I was young. And that's why people, he actually could sing, and I believe he played guitar.
Well, but I think this is how things become archetypes. It's like, and I think, and I say that to intentionally not discredit the singer from Tough or discredit Bret Michaels. Is that, yeah, a good-looking kid with blonde hair fronting a rock band is probably always going to be a relatively predictable formula for success, right?
Mm-hmm.
And there's other, and you can do that and not be doing a David Lee Roth, right? I think there's room for nuance there in terms of like we're all, it's like me, if I play a certain riff, yeah, at some point it's a version of a Tony Iommi thing, or it's going to be a version of a James Hetfield thing, and that just is what it is. Like we're standing on architecture that's already been built, and yeah, that I don't even know where I'm going with this, but I'm just saying. I just don't want to diss. I just don't want to diss these guys. I think
no. We don't have to. I don't think it's a diss. I think it's a way to look at it, almost historically, right? Dialectically. Let's look at it that way and say that genre of music really ends the moment Motley Crue, who are the forebears, they really do give you they set it in motion, right? This is how it's going to look. This is how it's going to sound. This is what you need. You need 4 guys. Like you said, you need a blonde singer. They're changing everything by 87 because everyone's copying them and they're doing their own thing. And another thing we have to keep in mind is there's bands that just want to be rock bands, but they have to add the iconography of the day.
Yeah.
Because it has to fit in with what's popular if you want to get your thing going.
I got this theory, like John Bon Jovi would have acclimated to whatever style was happening at the time and would have been successful at any time, right? Like John Bon Jovi probably would have sounded like Three Doors Down, if he came out in the early 2000s, or he would have sounded, the band would have sounded like Styx in the 70s or whatever, like, because he's just kind of like a generationally omnipresent talent that just you like, it had all the aesthetics of glam rock or whatever, but that was just because that's what worked. But that's why he can just easily transition into like Keep the Faith in the 90s, and it feels very of the 90s. It doesn't feel like it's a stretch, right? And I think there's some artists like that. Def Leppard, I think, is a band that kind of would have just been a great rock band in any era, but kind of just fit into the mold of what was going on at that time because it fit.
They look, their Kurt Hammett is always wearing a Def Leppard shirt in the early days of Metallica, and no one questions that because they're a metal band. And there's a great interview in the Headbangers Journey docuseries.
One of my favorites.
Where Joe Elliott says, and I quote, when we went to America, we heard Thriller. And we wanted to go back and make a Thriller for rock. And that's how you get Pyromania. And I was like, oh, that makes all the sense in the world. These guys were trying to make Thriller because they got it. They were like, this is how you get over in the States and the world and become the biggest band in the world. So I think these interviews, I think listening to people talk about it, it's hard because there's a lot of Like you said, there's a lot of bullshit in some of these stories, but there's a reality to what we're later going to call hair metal. That is a lot of rock and roll bands that did not care for anything metal. Reading the interviews of the post Dio era Sabbath bands or Sabbath iterations, how many singers didn't know the music, didn't like the band? I was like, oh my God, why do you even bother doing the gig, man? Like Ian Gillan did not like Black Sabbath.
That's weird.
He didn't bother to learn the songs. He is documented as saying that he wrote the lyrics down, because this is what, 83 when they do I can't remember the name of that record that Ian Gillan does with Black Sabbath. And he wrote them down and had them in a laminated book, and he would turn the pages with his foot. But Black Sabbath had smoke machines, so the laminated book would steam up. So he couldn't see the words. So he would just make shit up.
Bad system.
Make shit up. I'm like, oh my God, dude. But, bringing it back to a band like Megadeth and the Big Four, what's interesting to me about them is I think one of the things we don't talk about as the downfall of hair metal as well is we're all calling, it's like the early days of rap. One of the blessings I've had in this life is being able to do a tour with Biz Markie and hang out with him for hours on end. One of the nicest, coolest individuals ever. And when he shows you his photo album, which is I hate to, it doesn't sound like hyperbole. It's a pretty badass photo album. And it's like him and Will Smith and Eazy-E. I'm like, where the fuck were you guys? And he goes, we were on tour. I was like, what? He's like, it was just rap. It was just rap. There wasn't gangster. It wasn't this. It was just rap. And metal was just metal. You had spikes on, you're metal. Motley Crue, Metallica, it's just metal. Judas Priest, it's just metal. We don't have these hyper genre classifications. And the thrash guys were really allowed to just do their thing without a lot of major label input in trying to turn them into something, because no one really knew what was going to hit, because there was no way in the world you were going to tell a record label when they're going 8675309 is the way we need to go. It's all about skinny ties right now. Punk stuff is dead. MTV is coming, and Duran Duran is what we need. And then here you have quote unquote dinosaur music with Quiet Riot going to #1. Motley Crue sells 1 million copies with Shout at the Devil. So it's like, well, maybe this rock and roll thing is working. And they just put a lot of money into it. And to them, it's all whatever. And
also MTV is kind of, you have to, that rock music was the definitive kind of cultural touchstone for MTV, and that really defined the decade in a lot of ways.
MTV started off as a rock station. They only wanted to play rock music. Their first black artist was not Michael Jackson. It was actually the Jamaican kids that do Pass the Dutchie on the left-hand side. If you remember that. The trivia for you, if anyone asks. So when they rejected Michael Jackson, when he gave them the video for Off the Wall, they said, this doesn't fit our format because we are a rock station. And then you get Thriller.
Yeah.
History.
Smart move. I mean, Off the Wall, it's a disco record at a time when a lot of people didn't want to hear disco, probably.
It's probably, comes out in 79. It's probably the greatest, if we're going to classify it as something, black music album of all time. I didn't realize it sold 10 million copies. That's a lot.
Well, it might not have sold, did it sell 10 at the time?
Yeah.
Oh, that's crazy. Yeah, well,
that's
then
what I'm saying.
Retract my statement.
A
lot of people wanted to hear that shit.
It comes out at the tail end of disco. 79 is a great year for music. If you guys want to hear more about the year of 79 in music, we have a series on TIR called Is this the greatest year of music? We're doing another episode, 1971. We did the show on 79, and for me, 79 might be one of the best years of music with 1982. Off the Wall, Prince's first record, I think, comes out in 79. There's a lot of Joy Division, the first Cure record. There's a lot of stuff coming out in 79. The Germs. It's a kind of a phenomenal year of music to go back and listen to. But when you think about kind of going back to the thrash guys, these guys were able to do their thing. And I think the quote unquote realness, because there's always purists in every aspect of life. There's a purist, there's gatekeeping, there's cultures of authenticity. And for the metal people, Metallica, Megadeth, Slayer, Anthrax, Exodus, those guys are really pure forms of metal. And they're getting massive tours. Metallica gets to open for Ozzy when Ozzy is doing arenas. Megadeth gets to open for Aerosmith and Alice Cooper when they're doing arenas. So that really helps solidify this music as serious music. It gets it out to a whole, again, Doc, you played in front of big ass crowds of people that you would not have had a chance to play in front of had you gone on a headlining tour. It can change your life.
Yeah.
And Metallica got to do something that not a lot of bands get to do. Chris Contos pointed this out when we did our book launch. He goes, Ozzy let Metallica have their staging for that tour. All the crosses and shit. You opened. Did you get to have all your fucking... Did you even have a budget for all that fucking staging that Metallica had?
I mean, I've never been outside of touring with Ice Nine Kills, which like isn't my band. You know, I haven't really been in a band that's had that much production. So
Right. That's best production trucks.
yeah.
You're not towing that shit in a trailer. Those are production trucks. That's also Elektra Records. You know, saying we're going to push this band. But it's a very interesting thing to think about, all the things that those guys were able to have that really blows them up. So by the time the 90s hit, they can really say we're going to all work on our opuses. The Black Album, Seasons in the Abyss, Countdown to Extinction, Sound of White Noise. Like these guys are like certified MTV bands at this point. They're all doing big rooms on their own. Was it 91? You get the first Clash of the Titans tour.
Well, it's the first and only, and you know, in a weird way, right? Like that point, in a way, is the end of. It's the peak and kind of the end of like the traditional thrash era, because again, a lot of the second tier and third tier bands kind of start to fade off or have some troubles. And again, all those bands have these stylistic shifts, and the 90s are their own thing, you know, and spearheaded by Metallica making the biggest album basically of the entire era. Like it's the biggest selling rock metal albums since that time.
Yeah.
And it's not close. And then they become number one. But but Megadeth is kind of a pretty, I would say, close number two, but they do launch themselves into mainstream notoriety. I remember like on Countdown, like TRL, like Megadeth would have the number one song. I remember Sweating Bullets was the number one song voted by people. When the next record, Euthanasia, came out, they had a whole Halloween special on MTV built around the release of Euthanasia. And then not too long after, you know, even later in the decade,
Cryptic
you know,
Writing.
Cryptic Writings was probably their biggest radio single with Trust, and you know, Use the Man was a big song off that record. And they kind of continue. They really, you know, 3 records. And I'm not a Risk guy. I do not like that record, and that's kind of the end of that era. But it is the exclamation point, and this is like right before Marty Friedman leaves the band, is they headline a night of Woodstock '99, which is like kind of hard, I think, to imagine of how big you had to be to be the one of the close. I think they might have been the closing band of the whole thing. I can't remember, but they were like they closed one of the nights of Woodstock, which is that's about at that time that was the peak of kind of popular music culture, at least for what was considered like the key demo, right? That 18 to 35. That was
Yeah.
that was it. So that was a real that was a real era of being able to talk about what we're talking about and kind of being at the creme de la creme of the technical side of thrash metal and really the sophisticated songs and the playing, and then really transition into being a mainstream kind of rock band for the next 10 years and do it successfully is, we unfortunately the shadow of Metallica is long and wide and overbearing, but do not we should not fail to give Megadeth credit for really staking a claim and on their own right, right? This was not riding coattails. This was not we're gonna get some Metallica backwash. They were their own entity and really acquitted themselves well. And I'm a big euthanasia guy. I'm a big cryptic writings guy. I think it's some of the best songwriting the band's ever done. I think it's the best. Those two records, I think it's the best vocals that Mustaine has ever delivered. So I'm a big fan of that era. And even kind of they broke up and the ND 45 and then they came back. There's some of those records Endgame I really love, and United Abominations I love Dystopia I think is great.
Is that where he has the Obama birther song?
He might, I don't know.
I know it's like the Alex Jones years for Dave Mustaine.
He might,
I remember listening to that record like, what the fuck did he just say?
I think one of them is Ode to Rick Santorum. But it's all right.
What's funny is, and we can start to wrap up. What's funny is there's a video for Peace Sells who's buying, and I know you've seen it, where the father walks in the room and he goes, I want to watch the news. And the kid goes, this is the news. That was me. I was like, Dave Mustaine is the smartest man in the world. And he can kick everybody. I was talking about Dave Mustaine like he was my dad, but Dave Mustaine kick your ass.
He'd fight you.
Dave Mustaine is a certified badass. He plays V guitars. Does your dad play V guitars? Nope. Dude, that part in that video, I was like, yes. What do you mean I don't believe in God? Of course, Dave Mustaine.
No, dude,
the truth.
That's what to me, like when I hear, like maybe it's choose your politics, whatever. But when I see kind of like the I don't give a fuck, I'm going to say what I want. Like you see kind of like the persona like Ronnie Radke has.
Mm-hmm.
That's not too dissimilar, or like the way that Eminem was, like kind of in the late 90s, early 2000s. I think Mustaine was kind of that guy for metal. Like the Metallica guys were not very outspoken. The Slayer guys, every now and again, you get a Kerry King interview that would come out where he, maybe, speaks up truth to power about organized religion or Christianity, but they were a pretty mysterious band. Anthrax was the fun band, right? They're on, they're talking about comic books and they're on Married with Children. And so he was really the, the kind of soapbox guy, but it actually, I think it actually had something to say. And I think it felt in like when as his star began to grow in the early 90s, that was I think this is the reason why he fits in the 90s is that's when you did start to have these grunge bands who were talking about abortion, talking about feminism, or talking about certain political aspects. Like all those bands were pretty relatively, I think, politically engaged at that time. And I think, he was of that. It was a bit higher minded. It was a bit more intellectual. And it, again, made the band stand out. I mean, Countdown to Extinction was all about environmentalism as far as that's the way I read it.
Yeah. No, that's the point. And I want to ask you this before we
Rock
go.
the vote, bro.
I was
Rock
gonna
the
say
vote.
Dave Mustaine becomes there's a power shift, and people have to get back in the Wayback Machine to remember that we sat under 12 years of Republican rule and the neoliberalism and conservatism that is the Reagan Bush era, and Clinton, which is kind of an extension of that with a nicer face, is representing this change.
If you really think about it, though, you only have Carter in the midst of that. So you're talking really going back to
And
if you
deregulation
take
does
you know what
start
I'm saying,
at Carter, yeah.
but if you take from Nixon
Mhm.
all the way up to Bush one with just that one bit of Carter,
Yeah.
it's we're a conservative nation, we're a center right nation, and that's how countercultures envelop, is against the backdrop of kind of a mainstream dominance, of kind of what was going on. So
And this is a big moment for people that are voting for the first time, right? And Dave Mustaine was chosen by MTV to cover the Democratic National Convention. That's insane to think about for a second. That a metal guy got a microphone and got to interview Bill Clinton during this kind of seismic shift also with the Rock the Vote campaign. Let's get young people out to vote. So when we think of Megadeth as being the important band, it wasn't like we're just making this shit up. The powers that be felt that same way as well.
I think
And
was it Headbangers Ball, or was it the news thing? Doesn't one of them
it's
use
the
the
news.
P
It's the
cells?
MTV news. Doom,
P
doom, doom, doom,
cells.
doom, doom, doom. Yep.
See,
You hear it.
see, you gotta feed your brain with itty bitty bullets of knowledge. Know what I miss? I guess listen, and remember when is the lowest form of a conversation, but Dennis Leary would have these bits where he would just
Ooh.
rant,
Yep.
and
The
it's
little
like, and maybe by today's standards, maybe it might be a little I don't know, performative, or maybe he is performing, but back then we were like, yo, this dude is spitting.
that was his. Remember, that was his thing. His stream of consciousness rants.
Yeah,
That's what he
yeah.
does in the movie Suicide Kings. Like, you watch the whole movie for him to have his weird little stream of consciousness
The Ref
rant.
as well. The
Yeah.
Ref, great one.
Um,
Shout out to
it's
Dennis
funny.
Leary.
That's a deep cut there, dude. Dennis Leary. Shout out to Dennis Leary. That's a 90s, 80s deep cut angry comedian guy that I don't know if he exists anymore in the same way. But
I mean, there's a lot of pissed off. They all have podcasts now, so
no, it's different. It's not the same.
it's not the same. But
as a person that does this for a living, it's not the same.
you're just not that angry. He was angry, like
No. Yeah, the "I'm an Asshole" song. I remember that. Yeah, I'm an asshole. Yeah, yeah. Dennis Leary. We're going back in the Wayback Machine now, thinking about the kind of the heyday, I think, of this music. And not only are we going to listen to Megadeth, we're going to listen to some of Doc's music, listen to some God Forbid stuff. We're going to listen to some other metal stuff that maybe inspired Megadeth, because, as you know, we have the history of recorded music at our fingertips. And I'm going to pull up all these songs. I've made a Megadeth playlist. Why? I don't know. But it's what I think are their 25 best songs. I have one from Metallica, Slayer, Anthrax, and the Deftones, and Motley Crue.
You have a top 25 for each of them.
Top 25. But the Motley Crue one was the hardest because I was like, these guys have so many songs about fucking kids. Jesus. More than
I'm not gonna get into it.
It was like, this is not fun. She was 14. She was what?
Really? They say 14?
Dude. They have so many songs. You're like,
They're like, here's her address, here's her social security number. I'm like, that's a little detail, don't you think?
like 16 and she's looking clean. I'm like, whoa, times. Y'all are all in your 20s. You don't want to fuck anyone your own age? No? Okay, well.
Listen, that's a whole other podcast. We can get into that one.
McRub says, so the Karl Malone playlist. I tried not to put those songs in, but when you're actually trying to find Motley Crue, for me, has like 2 albums. And on tour once, I was talking to my buddy, and he goes, Dr. Feelgood is a trash album. I was like, how dare I was like, oh. And I had never heard it. Doc, I had never heard it because I never owned it. But they had 7 singles from it. I knew the singles. He goes, outside of those singles, that album is trash.
Listen, if you have 7 good songs on a record, you're doing all right. All right. I don't know about your friend and his estimation levels. All right. 7 is a pretty good hit number. I don't know how many songs on the album.
Dude, put that. You know what? Next time you're on the drive, put that album on, and you'll be like, oh, this is not as good as I thought it was.
Yeah, but I'm not like I probably never even owned a Motley Crue album. I just know the big hit songs from MTV and the radio.
Shout Out to the Devil is a very good album.
Maybe I had Dr. Feelgood, maybe, or is it Dr. Feelgood, or what's the one with? You
mean Dr. Feelgood? Yeah, that's Kickstart My Heart. Yeah, Dr. Feelgood.
Kickstart, yeah, that's a good record. Or at least the singles are good.
The singles are great, and then you get into the other songs that are singles. You're like, oh, you guys had 5 power ballads on this album. Okay.
Does everything have to be a power ballad? Can't just be a ballad. Does it have to be powerful? Can we have definitely
powerful?
Okay, all right.
Those songs are powerful. Is there ballads? I do think Motley Crue invented the quote unquote power ballad, even though there's songs that are softer that exist before them, like Dream On, for example. You can say Dream On is the first power ballad. You can say Stairway to Heaven is the first power ballad if you want
to. Yeah.
No,
it's like a prog epic.
It's 13 minutes long.
What?
Stairway to Heaven.
It's not 13. It's like
it's like 11. This shit is long as fuck.
Dude. Here, let's go Stairway to Heaven. I thought it was 8. Is it 11?
It's like 11.
We're gonna go to the videotape. I was 8:02. I'm a winner.
8:02. Doc is right. You try writing an 8:02 radio song in 1970, whenever the fuck that came out.
Well, I don't think they wrote it as a radio song. Well, they did get sued over it. So, so right in quotes.
The AOR era is my favorite era of music. The album oriented rock. I love it. I love it. I love it. I love it. It's my favorite era of music, from the hard rock stuff to what we're later going to call yacht rock, which I don't agree with. Some of the best music comes out in the 70s.
I'm with you.
Yeah, album oriented rock era, all day long. But let's go to the champagne room. Doc and I have some music to play for you guys. Can't play it on the main show because they'll take it down. This is going to be fun. I'm excited to play some crazy music for Doc and watch his face. Also, the Better Lover shirt Doc is wearing. I got to interview Jordan Buckley on this show from that band. Go check that interview out.
Great guy. Way funnier than me. He's hilarious.
He, like you, was like, oh, this show is serious. He was like, I didn't know you're going to. Steely Dan forever. Yes, that is my mantra. I think I own more Steely Dan shirts than any other band. Take that, Doc. So
solid.
Let's go to the champagne room, and we are out.